I would like to emphatically state for the record, this is not a book hating channel, but I do think it's important to talk about books we don't like, why we don't like them, and use that feedback to write better books. Today we're going to talk about a book that I read earlier this year for a book club that let's just say it haunts my dreams in a very bad way. It is Anatomy, a Love Story by Dana Schwartz. I probably would have picked up this book under my own free will because the premise is really interesting. Gothic fiction set in Scotland is very much up my alley. And there was a pull quote from Neil Gaiman on the front. I love Neil Gaiman. We all love Neil Gaiman. I trust Neil Gaiman. But I will say, sadly, after reading this book, my trust in Neil Gaiman is not as strong as it once was. Not as strong as it once was. So this book came out in 2022. I remember it being pretty popular on the internet, but I did not read it until it was chosen for a part of my book club. So I'll just quickly read the synopsis in case you're unfamiliar with this book. I will be talking about spoilers, so if you do not want to hear spoilers, when I get into my review, log off, babe. Log off, I'm gonna tell you the spoilers. Here's the synopsis. Edinburgh, 1817. Hazel Sennett is a lady who wants to be a surgeon more than she wants to marry. Jack Currer is a resurrection man who's just trying to survive in a city where it's too easy to die. When the two of them have a chance encounter outside the Edinburgh Anatomist Society, Hazel thinks nothing of it at first, but after she gets kicked out of renowned surgeon Dr. Beecham's lectures for being the wrong gender, she realizes that the new acquaintance may be more helpful than she first thought. Because Hazel's made a deal with Dr. Beecham, if she can pass the medical examination on her own, the university will allow her to enroll. Without official lessons, though, Hazel will need more than just her books. She'll need bodies to study, corpses to dissect. Luckily, she's made the acquaintance of someone who digs them up for a living. But Jack has his own problems. Strange men have been seen skulking around cemeteries. His friends are disappearing off the streets. Hazel and Jack work together to uncover the secrets buried not just in unmarked graves, but in the very heart of Edinburgh society. A gothic tale full of mystery and romance about a willful female surgeon, a resurrection man who sells bodies for a living, and the buried secrets they must uncover together. Let's get into the review. Here are my thoughts about why this book didn't work. If you're a writer, perhaps these are some things that you can think about in your own work, pitfalls to avoid for you. If you're a reader, maybe you can think about these things more critically in your reading experience. I want to be really clear that I am not of the philosophy that there are good books and bad books. Not every reader is going to pick up on the same details. Not every reader is going to have the same icks in books. Everybody is different. Everyone has a different experience. I'm approaching this through the lens of a writer. So if I had written this book, these are some things that I would have been a little bit more careful looking out for, things that I think didn't work very effectively, and things that going forward in writing, I want to be aware of in my own work as well, because nobody is perfect. Everybody makes mistakes. And I think books that you don't enjoy are just as useful tools to getting stronger craft as books that you love. So here are 5 things about Anatomy, a Love Story that did not work for me. The first point is the complete lack of respect or even like the briefest attention given to poor people in this book. So our main character is essentially an heiress. She doesn't actually have access to the fortune. So she's definitely coming from the upper part of society. Jack, who is our secondary main character, comes from the bottom of the bottom, the lowest of the low. He starts the book speaking very candidly about his experience and about how hungry he was, how poor he was, how he didn't have what he needed to survive, how every day was a struggle because of his poverty. During this time in British society, there was, and continues to be, a really huge gap between the rich and the poor. And yet, that gap was not really addressed between the two main characters. It was sort of marginally addressed, but it was never a conversation between the two main characters. What also was never a conversation was the fact that Jack was digging up his fellow poor people, and Hazel, as a rich, educated woman, was dissecting them with no regard for their rights. There was no regard for the respect given to the dead. This was a Christian society at the time. Christians obviously have a lot of sort of rituals around death and the preservation of the body, and the rituals around burial and the afterlife are a big deal in Christian religion. This was not talked about at all in this book. She's digging up poor people, doing whatever she wants to with their bodies. There was no discussion about how she disposed of what she was dissecting. A lot of it, I think, she put in jars on her shelf, which is completely disrespectful to the body. She also would continually refer to the body as it and not as a human being, which is weird on a good day, but with her place in society, it was especially dehumanizing to me, to the point where I actively disliked Hazel because I found her extremely disrespectful of other people. Later on, Hazel uses ailing, ill, poor people to practice living medicine as well. She opens her home to allow poor people to come into her house where she operates on them free of charge. It's gross. It's weird to me. It's gross. She does not see these people as human beings. She has no bare human decency or respect towards them. She sees them as objects for her study. They're completely tools for her education. And that was a huge annoyance to me throughout the book. I was like, okay, well, maybe this is part of it, right? Like, she's going to learn to have more respect for people through medicine, right? Wrong. Doesn't happen. She doesn't give a shit about poor people. And that's her character. This was all especially galling because Jack, her love interest, was one of these poor people. He also didn't show very much regard for the people in Hazel's care. He didn't seem to have any issues with how she was treating them. That's also gross to me. I felt like Jack was very much using the proximity to Hazel to not be just another poor person. He's her assistant, but it was gross. It was weird. It was extremely disturbing. I don't think this was intended. I wasn't supposed to dislike Hazel, I don't think. At least that's usually not the case in fiction, especially YA fiction, but I genuinely did not like her solely because she was so disrespectful of everyone around her. So a writing tip off of that would be to be aware of how your characters treat other people and make sure that how other people treat them is in line with their character, with their standing to some degree, if that's part of the story. If you're writing something historical, there is going to be some sort of social context there. But just making sure your characters are not shit people, unless you want them to be, unless that's the goal. But if you want us to like your characters, how they treat other people is just as important as how they treat their love interest. And I feel like that was kind of the hang up here. We were supposed to be so focused on Hazel's personal journey and so focused on her romance with Jack that we weren't supposed to pay attention to how she was treating other people, but it made her largely unlikable. Also, a side note for this, I literally did one Google search about how the classes saw resurrection men during this time period in Scotland. The first result was an article that said, this situation with people digging up poor people and selling their bodies to science so that rich people and elite people could learn about medicine that way was a huge problem for poor people. They didn't like this. It created a huge gulf between the classes. One Google search and I found all of that information out. It just shows me that the author was not taking the care that she should have taken with this historical subject matter. And that's your second writing point, which is if you are going to talk about something historical, do your research. I'm going to keep talking about doing your research in my other points, because it was continually an issue for me in this book. But if you are going to write about a specific event or a specific situation that happened in a specific place, in a specific time that people can look up, make sure that you're dealing with it in the right way. Not only is this a sensitive subject matter because it involves literal human bodies being chopped up and experimented on and disposed of disrespectfully for science, but it also is a situation in which sort of social dynamics came to the forefront and became a really big issue. Failing to address that is, for me, going to make you as an author lose a lot of credibility. You're not taking the time to do the research. You're not handling a subject matter with sensitivity and care. And those are just two really big red flags for me. Number 2 kind of piggybacks off of number 1, but also is a trope just generally in YA fiction that I cannot stand. And that is, main character is perfect and is beautiful, but doesn't think she's perfect and beautiful. Stop doing that. Literally, stop doing it. It boils my blood. It boils my blood. I hate it. This is not to say that people can't have qualities or features that they maybe are insecure about or don't fully recognize in themselves that other people can see. That's totally a true thing. But if it's that she's pretty, it's a no for me. No, stop doing that. And it's made more unbearable when that's all of the other characters think about. Hazel doesn't realize that she's pretty. She thinks she's just a plain girl. But Jack loves her. Jack knows that she's beautiful. All Jack thinks about is how beautiful Hazel is. She's so beautiful and she doesn't even know. In fact, she's made more beautiful because she doesn't know how beautiful she is. That's stupid. It's so stupid. Off of that, and off of the first point, everybody treats Hazel like she's God come to earth. Everybody is in love with her. Everybody thinks she's great. Everybody thinks she's a genius. Everybody thinks she's beautiful. She's a saint for helping these disgusting poor people. She is a trailblazer. She's a god. Everyone in the book thought that about her all of the time. The people who were dying because of her medical malpractice thought she was a saint. Not only is this just unrealistic, right? Nobody is liked and adored by everyone. That just doesn't happen. Everybody's got haters. But it also reduces any sense of tension, any sense of stakes. All of that is lost. Because if everybody is on Hazel's side, who's the bad guy? Even the bad guy was like, do you know what? I think you have what it takes. It's just society that thinks women can't be doctors. Huh? She has no character flaws, allegedly. This makes her an incredibly boring character. Everything that I didn't like about Hazel came from what I saw as the flaws in the writing, or things that the author did not intend for me to think were flaws, like how she treats poor people, because I don't think the author thought very much about that. She's a boring character. I don't care about her. I'm not invested in her. The only real enemy for Hazel is a test and one creepy guy, and that's it. That's boring. No one cares. There's no stakes. There's no tension. The character becomes far less complex and far less interesting. So the writing tip here is to make your characters a little unlikable by some people in the story. It's really important to, first of all, make the story feel more realistic, right? Everybody has somebody that doesn't like them. That's a natural part of life. But it also creates more avenues for conflict later. Maybe because this person doesn't like her, it could start a disagreement later at a crucial point. Maybe because this person doesn't like her, it starts her questioning what she's doing and what she believes about herself. There are all of these avenues for conflict that are cut off when your character is a saint that everyone loves. And at risk of overstating this, it's boring. So boring. The third point is one I didn't see coming based on the premise of the novel. Premise is, girl wants to be a surgeon. Society says girls can't be surgeons. Girl tries to find some other way to become a surgeon. I don't know about you, but my immediate thought is feminism, right? Is my women's college degree showing? That sounds to me like we're going to be talking about feminism. Newsflash, you're dead wrong. We're not talking about feminism. Hazel is in it for one person, and that's Hazel, no one else. Hazel's getting to the top, she's taking no one with her. Hazel is not trying to deconstruct a society in which women are not allowed to pursue their passions and their intellectual interests. Hazel just wants to be a doctor. There is no conversation in this book at all about women's rights, feminism, women joining together to defeat patriarchy. I don't even think the word patriarchy is mentioned. Hazel is in this for herself, for her personally. She sees it as an annoying roadblock that she can't do it because she's a girl, but it's never something that she thinks critically about. Adding insult to injury, she name drops Mary Wollstonecraft and then turns around and is dismissive and patronizing to every other woman in the novel. Every single one, rich or poor, she does not discriminate on the basis of social class. She just doesn't like women, period. It's weird. It makes no sense. How are you going to set up this book with a premise of a girl fighting a patriarchal structure in a historical setting and not talk about feminism? I need to lie down. What is happening? What is going on? She has no thought about helping any women out of their socially enforced roles, even rich women. She's an equal opportunity rights denier. Hazel only knows poor people who she's operating on and her servants. She has no friends, no female companions at all. I don't even know that she talks to another woman. I may not pass the Bechdel test, frankly. In fact, she hates women. She hates women who gossip. She hates that they only think about their children. She just hates women and does not for 1 second have a critical thought about, why do I hate these things about other women? Why do I see this as women's problems? And what what might my problem with getting into medical school have to do with all of this? Doesn't occur to her, not one single time. Hazel Sennett has 3 brain cells and they're all focused on how famous she's going to be when she solves the fever, the plague that's sweeping the city. She's entirely too dumb to think critically about her situation to where she has to get married to somebody she doesn't love or even really like that much in order to escape poverty and to escape being thrown out on the streets. And she doesn't even have enough brain cells to think about how a medical career could get her out of that situation. She entirely sees the medical career as a way to get famous before she gets married to the guy she doesn't like. It's like a little side quest for her. She doesn't think about it at all as a tool to help her or other women, forget other women, out of a really bad situation and to make a different life for herself. So the writer's tip here is not that your book needs to push an agenda. It's not that your book needs to have some sort of moral theme, but it does need to be aware of itself. Books are going to tell a message whether the author is meaning to or not. And when you put on the back cover, hey, modern reader, this book has something that may be interesting to you, which is gender politics or looking at gender through a historic lens, then the book needs to follow through with that in some way. No matter what you do as the author, your book is going to have some sort of message to people. It's kind of unavoidable. No art is made in a vacuum. It's going to be telling something about the author, something about the world, whether the world that it's being written in or the world that it was set in. And so you as an author, when you're going over your novel in your editing stages, you need to kind of identify what your book is saying about some big ideas, especially when your book is set on the premise of a big idea. I don't think that this needed to be a feminist manifesto. I don't think Hazel needed to be waving a flag in front of the Parliament building trying to get votes for women. I do think that the story would have been better served by Hazel having a little bit more of a critical idea. Just one critical thought about her situation, about what that single incident had to do with the world at large. Because her failure to think about anybody but herself makes her a very unsympathetic character. The book is set on a very feminist message, and while I don't believe that the book needed to be a manifesto, it does need to engage critically in some way with that topic. If it doesn't want to deal with that topic, you got to change the plot, because you can't talk about a girl wanting to get into medical school, but she can't because she's a girl, without talking about patriarchy, without talking about feminism. The fourth point is that nothing in this novel is resolved. Absolutely nothing. One more time, nothing set up in this novel is resolved at the end of the novel. Not a single thing. At the beginning of the novel, there was discussion about a fever that was going on, and that was a lot of the impetus for Hazel to get involved in the medical profession, was that her brother had died and she had lived, and she wanted to explore why. She felt like the medical profession was the way for her to do that. It's not resolved. We do not know why the fever was started. We do not know if it's natural or unnatural in origin. We do not know what caused it. We do not know why Hazel lived and why her brother died. It just goes away. Further, the line of the fever was dropped very early in the novel. It was the driving plot device in the first chapter, where Hazel's thinking about why she wants to be a doctor, what's so important to her, what her tragic backstory is. One theater closes near the beginning of the novel, which sets Jack into crossing Hazel's path, and they do not talk about the fever again. It occasionally comes up in Hazel's house for nasty, ugly, poor people who think she's a saint. No one in the upper echelons of society ever talks about it, so we don't know if this is like a poor people thing or if it's an everybody thing. No further businesses or governments take any precautions towards stopping the fever or dealing with it in any way. None of the other doctors talk about it. None of the other medical students talk about it. Maybe Hazel dreamed it up. I don't know. Why would you expect that to be resolved? It was stated in the first chapter as being a very big deal. Why would you expect it to be resolved at the end? The romance plot. Extremely slow burn. Burn is a strong word. Extremely slow smoke. I think there's like a little smoking going on, but we're not burning anything. They can't be together because he's poor? Another unresolved plot line. Becoming a doctor. She doesn't, I guess? She just is gonna freelance medical aid in her house on poor people for free? So on top of none of that being resolved, we also don't find out what Hazel's going to do about her financial situation. Is her mom just gonna let her continue to run a poor people's hospital out of her house for free? Who's gonna pay for all of the medical supplies and all of the food? And there is no resolution for any of the points brought up in the beginning of the book. None of them are resolved. All of the premises on the back of the book, none of them are resolved. So basically what I'm saying is this was 350 pages of Hazel not knowing she's beautiful, and poor people and Jack telling her she's beautiful and a saint. What more do you need? I think the writer's tip here is fairly obvious. If you make promises to resolve certain things at the beginning of your book, you should resolve them. These things are issues for my main character. These are the things that she has to deal with. I expect, not unrealistically, at the end of the novel to have all of those things dealt with. You have to make good on the promises that you make your reader. Otherwise, like me, they will lose faith in you as a writer. They won't pick up the sequel. Nothing was resolved in book 1. Why should I read book 2 to just get more problems and have nothing ever resolved? It's unsatisfying. Imagine if you started reading Lord of the Rings and Gandalf was like, this ring, it's so evil, it's gonna ruin the whole country, so you have to go and you have to destroy it. And Frodo was like, okay, I'm gonna go. And then it was just 3 books of him wandering around and never making it to Mordor, and then it ends and you have no idea if Sauron came and killed everybody, or if Aragorn became the king. Nothing. You knew nothing. It was just Frodo wandering around and Sam telling him how great he is for 3 books. That would be crazy, right? The final point is also kind of pulling off of the writing tip of do what you say you're gonna do. Fulfill your promises. This book is titled Anatomy, subtitle, A Love Story. I don't think it's insane for me to be like, this is a romance, right? It's not. In fact, the two love interests do not meet until 46% of the way into the novel. 46%. And you might be thinking, okay, well, maybe it was just delayed and it's going to be gratifying and the romance is just going to be so good, but you're not going to notice that it took so long for these two people to even meet. Wrong again. Completely unsatisfying. The whole premise of their love story is that Hazel is beautiful and doesn't know it. I'm not joking. I'm not being hypercritical of this book. I'm telling you exactly what is there. That's all that's there. Jack and Hazel have nothing in common. Nothing in common. They come from two different social worlds. They don't read the same books. They don't have the same interests. They're just two people who happen to have found a comfortable arrangement for them to work together. And Hazel's beautiful, which of course is the main ingredient of any healthy and long-lasting romance, right? She's beautiful. That's it. What more do you need to know? What was extra frustrating for me about the romance was that there was so much potential for really good conflict. Not only was Hazel engaged to someone else, so there's already that conflict. Not only did they come from different social worlds, so that's a huge conflict. Not only was Jack doing something highly illegal and Hazel also doing something that I would guess was probably extremely illegal at the time. So there's so much area here to have a really interesting conflict, to create really great stakes and really awesome tension between these two characters who should not be together but want to be together. But none of that was explored. Jack had no problem being friends with Hazel despite the fact that she was rich and that he was stealing dead bodies for a living. That's fine. I also probably wouldn't think about that. The biggest moment of stakes in their relationship was if Jack could figure out how to ride a horse without Hazel knowing that he didn't know how to ride a horse, because why the hell would he know how to ride a horse? He's poor. It was just overall such a superficial and baseless romance between two people. Jack, who I didn't get to know well enough, but I found him an interesting character, but I didn't get to know him well enough to really care that much about his stakes in the relationship, and I hated Hazel by that point. So even if I had liked Jack enough or known enough about him to be able to like him a whole lot, I would not have been happy with him being in love with Hazel. So it was a lose-lose for me all the way through. I have seen some talk online about whether the love story is meant to be the romance or if it's meant to be Hazel's love for anatomy. Weird thing to say, but okay. Especially weird given that she's cutting apart dead poor people for fun. So to me, I read a love story as Hazel being in love with herself. And I don't mean that in a hashtag girl power, hashtag self-love kind of way. I mean that in that she is such a selfish narcissist and I hate her. I don't think I was supposed to. So the writing tip for the love story is kind of going back, what you promise, deliver on. And also, if you have two characters that are supposed to be in love, you have to give me a reason for them to like each other, much less to love each other. That has to grow organically. It has to grow in the context of the world in which the story is taking place. That didn't happen for me. It didn't work for me. It felt really superficial. It felt too modern sometimes. And it just didn't take any sort of context from the world it was living in, which I feel like was a really big loss in this novel. The last thing I want to quickly talk about is writing historical fiction. If you are going to write a book set in a real world with real events that happen to real people, please do your research. Make sure that the details you are adding are correct. Make sure that you're getting the right tone of the society and what was going on and what people believed about it. especially in something as recent as the 1800s and from a society in which we have a plethora of documented evidence about what was going on and what people thought about it. You need to do your research. You need to make sure that you're doing your due diligence, not only for your readers, so that we're not Googling everything and being like, what the hell is this lady talking about? But also just to have some respect for the people that you're writing about, especially the ones that were victims of situations like this. It's very easy for us to Google who were some famous anatomists during this time. It's much less easy for us to Google who are all of the people that got chopped up so that we would know where our gallbladder is. And again, on the research, if you are going to include something in your book, Google it, please, and make sure that you're right. There is a scene where someone mentions having an appendectomy in 1817. We were not doing appendectomies in 1817. That was at least 60 years later when appendectomy started becoming popular. We didn't even know where the appendix was at that point, much less that we could cut it out and survive. So no one's gonna have an appendectomy in 1817 or earlier. There were no water closets in 1817 in Edinburgh. It was common practice for people to just hike up their skirts or drop their pants and go wherever they needed to go when nature called. All of that I could Google and find out within 2 seconds. All of it was first results answers. If you are going to add historical detail, please do your research. Please make sure that the information that you are including is correct. And this isn't all on the author. There were a lot of fail-safes there that were missed. Editors missed it, copy editors missed it, agents, but everybody missed this. But they're big deals. They make you look unprofessional. They make you look like you don't care about what you're writing about. And it's not a good look. So please do your research, fact check, make sure you're right. Overall, this book was not for me. It did not work for me. Nothing in it worked for me. I wanted to love it so bad. I love Gothic fiction, especially that's sort of Frankenstein inspired. I love it. I think it's great. But if you're going to write in a tradition of Gothic literature, make sure that you're following the general rules of the Gothic fiction. Make sure that you're following general rules of writing fiction in general and how plots work and how characters are supposed to work and what you're supposed to include where. So again, I'm not a book hater. I'm not a hater. This is not an attack on the author at all. This is just me airing my thoughts about something, especially a book that became so popular, and giving writers some advice about how you can avoid some of these pitfalls that made me feel insane. I hope you find this helpful. I hope that there was something in it that was useful to you in your writing journey. If you've read this book and you loved it, I'm so sorry. You should have turned this off a long time ago. If you read this book and you hated it, feel free to go in the comments and share with me what historical inaccuracy made you want to pull all of your hair out. Like and subscribe. I'm going to be here next time with more positive focused book reviews in the future. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time. I have to show you a picture of this book because I no longer own it. I donated it when I moved, but I'm very curious to see if anyone ever picked it up and saw all of my furious, angry, frantic note-taking in the margins and thought, what a fucking psycho. You know what this YouTube channel needs? A freak show. And they're doing the little freaky things in the background just to ruin my audio.